Hi everyone, welcome to the Technology Happy Hour. My name is Sarah Stalkup, and I am a program coordinator here with Virginia Clean Cities. And today we will be hearing from Mike Cecere and Sahar Kamali of Clean Energy Fuels, and they'll be talking to us about renewable natural gas. Mike joined Clean Energy, North America's largest provider of vehicular natural gas, to expand their Eastern region solid waste and recycling market back in 2007. Mike is responsible for Clean Energy's business development activities, where he works closely with public and private fleets to grow the natural gas vehicle industry. He focuses on developing long-term fueling agreements with high-volume fleets that benefit from both fuel and operational cost savings associated with transitioning their diesel fleets over to clean domestic renewable natural gas. Sahar Kamali is the Director of Sustainability for Clean Energy, the nation's largest RNG fueling solutions provider. Ms. Kamali focuses on the development of renewable natural gas as a sustainable fueling solution for transit, municipal, and fleet customers. Ms. Kamali leads internal sustainability reporting and guides the overall emissions reporting process for Clean Energy, as well as working with carbon-concerned companies to identify how RNG can be part of their emissions reduction strategy. Ms. Kamali assists the fleet operators in developing the tools and resources to effectively evaluate the greenhouse gas emissions impact of their operations, as well as the economic impact of adopting renewable natural gas in their fleets. In 2020, Clean Energy sold over 153 million gallons gas equivalent of renewable natural gas. So now we can go ahead and jump over to the Clean Energy team. Mike or Sahar, if there's anything else you want to do to introduce yourself, feel free. But otherwise, Mike, you can go ahead and take it away for that presentation.
Good.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I want to first of all thank Sarah and Alan for giving us, asking us to do one of these cocktail hours. Hopefully, some of you guys have cocktails in your hands. I do not. I have to coach flag football after this, so I'm going to wait till after that. But thanks again for giving us the opportunity to really give an update on, why natural gas, especially renewable natural gas now. That's the new. Not so much new, but it's really taken off in a big way. And why is that? So I'm happy that my great colleague, Sahar Kamali, was able to join me on this one. She's our sustainability director, and she knows far more about RNG than I do. So I wanted to make sure that I had one of our experts on the line, just in case I get a question that I was unable to answer, because I only know enough to be dangerous on the RNG side. So Sahar, thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to go quickly through, why natural gas, and just a quick rundown of, for those of you who don't know Clean Energy by now, just a quick background, what we do, but most of you do. It's good seeing a lot of familiar faces. So let me get started. So renewable natural gas, proven and available today. I think this is important. Being on the board of, both Virginia and New Jersey Clean Cities coalitions, we are fuel neutral. I've always said, since I started with Clean Energy almost 15 years ago, there is no one silver bullet to get us where we need to be with reducing both emissions and foreign oil displacement. With that said, I have always said that we have to be realistic and honest with ourselves with what is viable, realistically viable, and available today for every sector, light, medium, and heavy duty. And as you all know, there's one technology is being pushed down everyone's throat across the country. I'm not going to go back and forth on different technologies, but I just want everyone to realize that there's a place for every technology, and there's a time for every technology, and that some technologies just aren't there yet. But on the heavy duty sector, renewable natural gas is the alternative fuel that's viable, proven, and available today. And why is that? Because it's significantly less expensive than diesel. Today, oil is around 65 bucks a barrel. You'll see in diesel at, depending on where you are in the country, over $3, closer to $4. And our customers, just on the fuel side, if they own their own station, they're saving well over $1 a gallon. And if they're fueling at a public access station, it's probably closer to 50 cents a gallon. EIA projects stable, low-cost natural gas out to 2050. And with renewable natural gas productions, that's going to far exceed that. So you're going to see continued stable pricing for natural gas for a long, long time. It's a proven technology. This is a 4th generation engine, dedicated natural gas engine, Cummins. It goes right down the same assembly line as its diesel counterpart. The only difference is it's spark ignited. It has a different head. So at the end of the assembly line, the head is spark ignited. There's over 100,000 of these units running throughout the country today. So again, it's a 4th generation engine. It's not a 1st generation R&D experiment or exercise, governmentally funded. There's no DEF fluid, urea. There's no traps. There's no filters. That's a big deal on why natural gas continues to take off, is because diesel technology is becoming harder and harder to maintain and harder to keep on the road, specifically in a stop and go application, like a garbage truck, like a ready mix truck, like a transit bus, because they don't get to the certain mile per hour to automatically burn the trap. You're putting more responsibility on the driver, because when that trap light goes off, he has a decision to make. Either it goes off route, gets up to a certain mile an hour so the trap burns, or he hits a switch on the dashboard to burn the trap. And he has to make sure that he's not under a power line or a tree branch, or he could possibly burn it down. So again, another big reason why natural gas is taking off is because you're seeing significant savings on fuel maintenance, not having to deal with the additional after treatments to meet the emission standards that diesel has to do. A lot of our fleets are saying on top of the fuel savings, they're saving anywhere from 20 to 40 cents a gallon just on maintenance costs, running natural gas over diesel. Less oil changes, half the amount of oil changes. There's no range, there's no infrastructure issues. Natural gas, there's so many fueling system technology advancements that you could get on a tractor trailer, 200 gallons on board, and you could go 700 miles. So you don't have a 6-hour range. And if you turn on the air or heat, you may have a 5.5-hour range. You don't have to rely on unrealistic electric demands per charging point. So the infrastructure is there, the range is there. Another key benefit is it's significantly less quiet. So it's 90% quieter than its diesel counterpart. On top of all this, it's the cleanest and lowest carbon intensity fuel available today. Renewable natural gas is the only fuel that has a negative carbon intensity, and Sahar will touch on that in a little bit. But it reduces greenhouse gases by 70%, and NOx, which is the smog and soot in the air, by over 90%. Another important note is it's domestic. 98% of the natural gas that we use in this country is from this country. We don't have to rely on foreign sources. It's not, the price isn't influenced by global politics. American trucks running on American fuel. You know, some of these technologies, are you getting off of foreign oil? Yes, but you're also relying on a foreign source to move the truck moving forward. The natural gas is produced in this country. Renewable natural gas will be produced in this country by landfills, by anaerobic digesters, or by dairy farms. So again, it's more domestically produced running renewable natural gas compared to other alternative fuels. A little bit about clean energy. We are the largest provider of natural gas for vehicles in North America, CNG, LNG, and now RNG. We have over 560 stations across the country. We fuel over 50,000 vehicles a day. We sold over 400 million gallons last year and over 550 million RNG gallons last year. We're founded by Boone Pickens in 1997. We became Clean Energy in 2002 and we're publicly traded on NASDAQ. The big deal here, I added this point, is that we're not just station builders. So what you're going to find in the natural gas industry is you have some construction companies that want to get involved in natural gas and they're experts. So we only provide turnkey solutions. So we do everything in-house: design, engineering, permitting, construction, commissioning, and we maintain the stations after we're built. We never build the station and walk away. because there's a million moving parts and a lot of expensive equipment that needs to have a lot of preventative maintenance rather than show up when it breaks. So we spend a lot of time, money, and resources on our operations side to make sure, we meet our mission, which is to ensure all of our customers meet rollout every day. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off to my counterpart, Sahar, who's going to really dive in more deeply on the RNG side. And we can answer questions whenever we see a hand. Sahar, are you good?
Yes, thanks, Mike. Can everybody hear me? Good. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so we're going to talk about renewable natural gas. And actually, I should say before I start, I'm an alumni of Washington and Lee, so always happy to do, anything going on with Virginia. But talking about RNG, what we really see as some of the key advantages is that it is 100% drop-in fuel. So if you've made the investment in CNG vehicles, there's no reason you shouldn't be fueling with renewable natural gas. It is not a fossil fuel. So the feedstocks of RNG are anything that is an organic waste. So today, the majority of the RNG does come from landfills and wastewater treatment plants. More and more of the gas, though, is going to come from agricultural waste. So that's talking about dairy digesters, swine manure. So a lot of the agricultural waste that's not being used today is actually being captured and turned into RNG. Again, this is, renewable. It's at, existing feedstocks. So landfills are not going away anytime soon. Wastewater treatment, agricultural waste. These are things that are large feedstocks that are available today and are going to continue to be around. So, and then as Mike mentioned, how can we talk about decarbonization with RNG? And it really has to do with carbon intensity. So every fuel can have a carbon intensity. They have, we compare these fuels across, different types of fuels, whether it's gaseous or a liquid fuel or EV charging, and they all can be kind of compared on a level playing field. And renewable natural gas is the only fuel that's commercially available that can have negative carbon intensities. And we'll get into that a little more. So let's go to the next slide. So again, at any fueling station today that has CNG, RNG can be made available. What that means is really RNG is a fungible commodity, right? So as long as it's placed on the natural gas fueling infrastructure of the US, it can really be delivered to any station connected to that pipeline system. So a project might be injecting RNG in Michigan, and it can deliver RNG to a clean energy fueling station in California. And the way that that's possible is that really our entire natural gas system is interconnected. So if you theoretically turned off, every pipeline between those 2 points, the gas could theoretically flow from the project to the delivery point. Again, and it is affordable. So RNG, even though it's a premium fuel with a low carbon footprint, that does not mean that it's more expensive. There are basically a couple of major programs that generate environmental commodities. The renewable fuel standard being the major one for the federal, for the EPA, and then the low carbon fuel standard in California, and a couple other similar low carbon programs in other states. These offset the increased costs of making renewable natural gas and any alternative fuel. And so we can offer RNG at a discount to even fossil CNG. And again, it has the same benefits as CNG, so it does reduce tailpipe NOx emissions by 90%, and then GHG emissions can be, on average, say 60 to 70% for a landfill project, and 300% or better for a agricultural waste project. Let's see.
Next.
Yes, next. So this slide really shows where RNG starts and how it gets to the station. The first step is really identifying the source of organic waste. So a farm will have manure that's being collected on site. That that gas is actually that manure is actually then aggregated in a digester, which is typically just a big plastic cover over a lagoon. So it deprives that waste of oxygen, and it becomes there then is biogas that's generated. Biogas is something that's maybe 50% to 60% raw methane. Then it has a lot of other elements that need to be purified. So that's the upgrading system. Those upgrading technologies are typically then co-located with, the landfill or the farm. That's really the investment in, RNG production that's made by developers. And it creates a natural gas that's identical to fossil natural gas. So you're meeting the pipeline spec of the local pipeline. So it might be 97% methane, no more than, 2% water, no VOCs, things like that. So this gas is really identical to fossil natural gas. It's safe. It goes into the vehicle and makes no difference to the fuel consumer. The other thing to think about when we talk about not having, any really effect on the vehicles is that the gas that's produced is being commingled with the fossil natural gas in the pipeline system. So the renewable natural gas is just a small piece of all the natural gas on the system. So it goes in, it's commingled, and it's delivered to the station. Basically, the gas that's delivered to the station is still pretty much the same gas you were fueling with before. However, the renewable attributes are only, the users to claim and to get the benefit of. Okay, next slide. Oh, just one little thing here on the note is that biogas is not the only product that comes off of a digester. So on a food waste project or agricultural waste project, there's usually byproducts that can also be sold or used on site. So fertilizer, dry bedding, these will also reduce the total amount of waste that's coming off of the project.
Correct. And Sahar, I want to add one thing with regards to a lot of these production RNG, the gas being produced is actually, we're doing a project in Pennsylvania. The gas is actually much cleaner and much drier than the local utility.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. And even when they test it, they'll typically make that finding too, like the utility will.
Yep.
There's a couple questions. Okay, while we go to the next slide, I'm going to look at these questions. Okay, so what are you seeing? David says, what are you seeing as the range for RNG prices outside of California, Oregon, Washington versus CNG? I think it depends, but typically we're still seeing a discount to fossil CNG. So because I think what's interesting about RNG, and I just looked this up a few minutes before the call, is that, there is a lot of RNG flowing outside of California or any low carbon, fuel standard state versus renewable diesel. I just looked at the 2020 data, renewable diesel, almost 100% of it is going to California. So there's, nearly 600 million gallons and only about 4 million gallons of it is flowing outside California. So obviously with RNG, it's not such a stark difference, and we still see a premium, we still see a discount for RNG nationally. And then if it's mixed together, RNG and fossil-based CNG, is there no incremental cost to a fleet that specifies RNG? Again, I think that one will depend. So every, fuel provider will have a different standard for how they're going to distribute RNG. With clean energy, we want our customers to contract for RNG so that you can claim the benefits of the emissions reduction.
Correct. I think our biggest challenge, not only as a company, but as an industry, is that this is taking off at such a fast rate that you can't secure enough fast enough. And COVID unfortunately slowed down production, building these production plants there's a lot involved. It takes a lot of time. So we had some delays on production. Again, not just clean energy, but the industry as a whole. So, but with that said, when you meet with a new fleet, every year moving forward, we're going to be able to produce and secure more and more renewable natural gas. So realistically, when you meet with a fleet, you talk to them, you educate them about transitioning your gasoline or diesel fleet over to renewable natural gas. There's a lot involved. There's education, there's contracts, there's engineering design on building a station. Then you have to build the station, you got to commission it. It's a long process. So new customers interested in transitioning their fleet and building their own station, either on their property or somewhere near their operation, that's a year plus undertaking. So within the year plus or 2 years plus, we're going to be securing more and more renewable natural gas. So I think moving forward, as we build more infrastructure, we're going to be securing more renewable natural gas that will be able to take care of the demand that's justified.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, like you said, for every customer, what's valuable to an RNG provider is your term. So the longer the term that you're willing to commit to, I think you can get some more favorable terms on that RNG pricing. So now this chart is really showing those carbon intensities. So carbon intensity, the unit of measure is grams of carbon equivalent per megajoule. That unit of measure doesn't change. We want to keep that consistent so we can compare all types of fuels. The baseline is really gasoline and diesel, and you see that, you know, things can range from hydrogen being an average of a 53 to renewable diesel and traditional RNG, typically about the same range. The electric vehicle, what you see there is based on a very clean grid. So the carbon intensity of California's grid is basically improving every year. So this number is based on California. It was, you know, as high as 30 in the 30s before. So it really depends state by state. And then as far as renewable natural gas, the average dairy is going to be around a negative 320, average food waste around negative 80, and actually all of the RNG delivered in California now has an average negative CI. I think it's about a negative 16. So you're really seeing the impact of these dairy projects, even though the volume is not as much as the landfill gas. Just having those really negative CIs is making a big impact on the overall carbon impact of these fuels.
Where is fossil fuel natural gas on this chart?
It is around a 79. Yes, and that's CNG. So LNG would be a little bit higher than that. Okay, then we can go to the next slide. So again, you know, this is really just saying if the station is there, RNG can be delivered. You know, the volume, renewable natural gas really is a success story for alternative fuels. It started out probably the first year that you had any significant volume was around 2013, about 13 million gallons dispensed for the whole country. Today, you know, it's over 300 million gallons, and clean energy represents about 50% of that market share nationally, 60% in California. So, you know, we're obviously a big piece of you know, the RNG industry, but there's a lot of new producers out there. There's new demand, and we think that's great. We want to see you know, all types of industries looking at this and seeing how it can work for them. We've obviously been successful in refuse, transit, airports. We want to see more, you know, more trucking companies looking at this because it really has an emission solution for them. And then, you know, renewable natural gas is not going away. I think as we have more variety in our alternative fuels, like really low carbon alternative fuels, as there's more electric generation and there's demand for a lower feedstock for that generation and for the hydrogen reformers, you know, renewable natural gas can displace the fossil natural gas that those facilities are using. And then this is kind of the same thing, but related to natural gas fueling stations. So that infrastructure is already built to transition to hydrogen. We have kind of the capacity to expand what's already on site to be able to safely store hydrogen and deliver it to customers. And then, Mike's probably more familiar and comfortable talking about this, but really, all the benefits of the natural gas low emissions vehicles are available with RNG, and they're really better than what you see in a new diesel truck or a new electric truck. And that's because the NOx emissions from these near zero trucks is 90% less than what you'd see on that diesel truck. So it's not just the GHG emissions which are significant, it's these tailpipe smog emissions that we can really have an impact on, especially areas where there's heavy trucking. So trucking corridors, ports, airports, things like that.
Right.
You can take this one on, Mike.
Yeah, and you'll see from 2014 to today on the natural gas side, engine reliability, the uptime work was in progress. So our biggest struggles as an industry when we were creating it, let's just say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, wasn't really on the infrastructure side. Obviously, we didn't have the infrastructure that we have today, but the biggest challenge was there was only one engine. There was only one dedicated natural gas engine, and that was the Cummins Westport ISLG. It was a 9-liter engine that everybody put in their chassis, no matter if they carried garbage or if they were a tractor trailer hauling furniture. And it was at the end of the day, it was too small of an engine. So you had overheating issues, you had pistons cracking, you had sensor issues because it was being used in applications that it shouldn't have been. So there's been customers that got a bad taste in their mouth because they were early adopters. And, unfortunately, the engine just wasn't sized right. But now we have the 12-liter, the ISX, dedicated by Cummins. There's talk about a 15-liter a couple of years from now. I think Cummins is working on something in China. But again, the 12-liter is the game changer. So the 12-liter is the engine that should have been used in the private sector, specifically refuse and ready mix, and now on the tractor trailer side, it's doing amazing. They learned a lot from the ISLG, but the 12-liter has been, knock on wood, really a game changer for the industry. The engine certification, it went from 0.2. Now with the new Cummins near zero engines, they're 0.02. They got new certifications. Warranty went from 2 years, 250,000 miles to 5 years, 375,000 miles. This is going back to the new certification, near zero certifications. Renewable natural gas, we didn't have it. Now it's nationwide. Little history on clean energy and renewable natural gas. We were the first to start creating renewable natural gas at one of our landfills in Texas called McCombs Bluff. So we started the RNG industry creating it from a landfill. Right now, the majority, we had the production arm in clean energy. We were producing renewable natural gas, majority at landfills with partners like Waste Management and Republic Services. We sold that production arm to BP, but now we're back in it on the production arm. We have JVs with 2 of the largest oil companies, BP and Total, which I think says something about this industry moving forward, is that 2 of the largest oil companies, they're not saying the future of transportation is diesel, gasoline, electric, hydrogen. They're putting a lot of money invested in renewable natural gas and the natural gas industry as a whole. So I think that says something about our industry is when you have big oil, investing a lot of money in what we do. Fuel system advancements, this is what I talked about earlier. 10, 15 years ago, you didn't have as many options. Now, like I said, you could get up to 200 diesel gallon equivalents on board a tractor trailer and go 700 miles. Oil change intervals, that's why I said half. For federal GVW allowance, they approved that because our fuel systems add around, give or take, 2,000 pounds, depending on how you spec a truck. There's an allowance for the gross vehicle weight allowance for natural gas. Some of these technologies that are currently being seriously looked at is going to have a significant issue with this gross vehicle weight allowance, because they're losing 5 to 10 tons of weight from their fuel systems. Integrated aero kits, I don't even know what that means, to be honest with you. And infrastructure was development, and now it's nationally developed. So at a glance, blue chip customer base, leading, you guys know all about what we do. We pretty much went over all this. I think that's it. Are there any more questions?
I think there's a phenomenal opportunity with Virginia and landfill projects in the South. So, I've got some questions about how do we expand more methane capture, so that it's one thing to use your great projects in Texas, but we've got methane leaking out of the ground right 50, maybe 5 miles from where I am right now. It's just bubbling out of our landfills and wastewater. So a question about that. And then Mike and Sahar, how do we communicate this fuel to fleets? Folks that might already have fueling contracts in Virginia, it's like Columbia Gas is a big utility. Virginia Natural Gas has a fully decarbonization plan. Some of our cities, Richmond, they have their own natural gas utility, and they're ready to look at, hydrogen as well. But how do we communicate? So my main question is, how do we communicate the opportunity here? My expectation is that because California has an incentive that they gobble up some of the stuff, but how do we show the value and get some of these projects online in Virginia and DC?
So on the landfill side, one of our partners, they're underway on, oh my gosh, they already did the Westmoreland landfill in Pennsylvania. They're doing 6 others in Pennsylvania. They've done a number across the country. I can get you on the landfill side, anyone that you want to send my way, I can connect them to the company's Archaea Energy. They're doing a lot of landfill gas projects, and I can definitely put you in touch with them. And then, see, this is where Sahar comes into play. So the value of this renewable natural gas, number one, it's very expensive to actually do the production, right? So whether you're capturing and creating the renewable natural gas from a landfill or from an anaerobic digester or from a dairy farm, it's capital invasive, it's expensive. So there's really one credit, the RINs, and then there's the CARB, whatever it is in California. So that's why the majority of RNG is going to California, because that's where it's worth the most. Until California is saturated. Now, as a company, we're being strategic with excess RNG, right? We're not just going to give it to anybody because it's valuable, right? So anything outside of California, we're being very strategic with regards to, new customers or extending existing contract terms by using RNG that we may have available. Again, we cannot secure enough or produce enough fast enough. It's a good problem to have, but at the same time, everybody wants it. We just don't have it for everybody. So get them in contact with me. I'll do a little research on how much they're using on a gasoline or diesel gallon equivalent basis, and then we can figure out how much we have and how much we can possibly source.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, that market supply demand does shift. So there is so much focus on production, and what clean energy focuses on is really growing that demand, because we do think that there's going to be more RNG than demand at some point as well. Because we've talked about, some of these other feedstocks that it could go to, and also just, growing the demand overall. So I think that it will just continue to shift. Like in California, that demand is obviously so valuable. And so you can really command a premium if you have that infrastructure. But nationally, I do think it's still valuable, especially, someone like Columbia Gas, they're willing to commit to a long term, they're growing their volumes, things like that. That's where, as Mike mentioned, we're being strategic and looking at finding those customers.
Mhm.
Mike and Sahar, I'm also wondering, you look across Virginia, you look across the country, what's every town got? It's got a wastewater treatment plant. And yet that doesn't seem like it's been that big a source yet. What do you think it'll take for that to really start taking off? I mean, and I raised this, Helen's going to start laughing. I was talking with her boss again a week or two ago about the idea of, and here in Arlington, we have a wastewater treatment plant that's across the street from the ART and Wilmata natural gas refueling station. It's like put the pipe underneath Glebe Road and just, take care of it all. But I look at that and go, every town's got a wastewater treatment plant and they're just venting methane. And certainly as they do local sustainability plans and decarbonization plans, it's a source they have to deal with. So you've got an emission problem. And yet you turn around and go, well, actually, this could be a real benefit. What's it going to take, do you think? Or is it that you need lower cost technology to capture off a wastewater treatment plant?
No, it's a good question. We see some of it. We've seen some wastewater treatment plant. There's a couple plants in Oregon that have recently started up. There's obviously some in California. There's Washington State.
No, there's a
And
pilot project with DC Water too,
right, and then New
taking it off
York.
of, yeah.
The issue is that a lot of the wastewater treatment plants are not really sized. They're not going to produce enough gas where it makes sense on a scale, for a developer to make the investment. That's why it will take some public investment, and almost every project I mentioned is a public, there's a public, it's a public investment project. So I think that the, wastewater treatment plants, they're definitely looking at them in terms of RNG potential. There's definitely, a good number of the larger ones being developed. The smaller ones, it's just going to take more interest because it does take some figuring out. It's even though they're kind of not quite large enough to attract, the big developers, they're also going to produce more gas than any, single station really needs. So you still have to make that pipeline interconnect. So you got to figure out both pieces.
Yeah, it's
Thanks.
tricky. Even on the landfill side, you can't pick any landfill. The landfill has to be a certain size, creating a certain amount of methane today, and then they look at the life of the landfill moving forward. So there's a lot that goes into picking these, dairy landfills, like how much are they generating today and how much longer are they going to be generating? So there's a lot that goes into it. Like I said, it's not inexpensive. So that's why I guess I just learned that. I did not know the answer to that question, David. I'm glad that Sahar was on the line. So that was good to hear, but it makes sense.
Can I interject something as well?
Sure.
My experience has been with, this is Mary Ann from Argonne. My experience has been that most of the wastewater treatment plants, they need a lot of the heat and they use that on site. They also need a lot of electricity. And in many cases, it's cheaper for them to make their own electricity and reduce their demand for the power from the grid than to generate RNG.
That's right. Yeah, it's a lot less. It's a lot less expensive option, and it helps them save on electricity. So a lot of them go that route. That's a great point.
Oh, and the other thing I should add is with the farms, it's also advantageous to be able to cluster them so that you get the volumes that Mike was talking about. The economic volumes. One dairy farm may not produce enough RNG for it to be economic. So the strategy now is to cluster them and then send the manure to a single digester where you do have those economies of scale.
Correct.
Yep.
I think that this is Barry Carr. I agree with what you're saying, Marianne. That's a great idea. I know we're trying it here in upstate New York at a couple locations where the farmers would have their manure picked up and take to a central location to make them more efficient. But the bigger picture is, and I know clean energy's been working on this, is getting these mandates put in place, like getting low carbon fuel standards put in place that will reward the people that are trying to make cleaner fuel.
I agree, Barry, and you also need to have the RNG included in those standards.
Excellent. Do we have any more questions? If anyone wants to shout them out, go ahead.
This is Yak again in Fredericksburg. You know, the received wisdom for me has always been that the methane coming from landfills, from decomposing stuff, is sort of a dirty gas. So it's been surprising for me to hear that this can become fungible. Is that because it goes through a cleaning process before it goes into the loop?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, biogas, which is what that raw gas that's collected from any of these types of projects is dirty, right? It's only maybe 50 to 60% methane, has a lot of water, has a lot of CO2, might have VOCs. So those purification systems are what's on site. There's different types of technologies, but basically that system is what's going to, you know, separate the CH4 and make sure that it meets the pipeline spec versus all the other off gases.
And presumably somebody's certifying the output before they're letting it go into fungible stocks.
Yeah, it's metered. Almost every single project is going to be, you know, there's testing at the exit, at the pipeline that's exiting the project. And if it's not meeting the testing, then it shuts off. So you can't inject into that pipeline until you're meeting the spec.
Yeah, depending on where you are in the country, the local utility is going to have a standard. In most cases, like I said earlier, the RNG being produced even at landfills is much cleaner and drier than the actual local utilities gas, especially in Pennsylvania. I can tell you that.
This is Robin in the State Energy Office. And about 10 years ago, if you can remember back when we had ERA funds, I worked on three projects kind of along this line. One had to do with a 2,000 head dairy in Martinsville area, where we spent money to help the farmers build collection, I can't think of the word, anyway, to collect the manure and to generate power. It was a big project, and although we spent $1 million, the farmer spent probably $1 million to do this, and all to generate power. But we had such a time with our local utility. They didn't want to, I mean, it was just a major struggle. And so now, actually, a couple of days ago, I was talking with someone and found out that the farmer had just, because of so many problems, felt he had to walk away from that project. And so that, I mean, that's a sad story. I've frankly put a lot of effort to get it going, get it into the ground. And then I never really looked back because of the pace of life. Another project that we did was with the city of Martinsville again. And this one was with the city, and to put in collection for power generation for use at its landfill. I guess it was Marianne that was talking about a similar idea. And that was felt to be a really wonderful and successful project. The third one was a project, I think it was in Roanoke, and it was a similar project that we did at the water treatment plant. And anyway, so those are three local projects. I'm sure there are many others, but those are just three that I happen to know about because we were able to spend some of our American Reinvestment and Recovery Act monies on those.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Don't send me to jail because I don't know whether, I mean, at this long look back, I don't know whether those were good investments or not, or whether they were just a little premature. So I'm really thrilled to hear Mike and Sahar talking about projects and ideas that they have for picking this up, because this is an unused, I mean, we make lots of gas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Robin,
thank you.
you brought up a very good point. I think your projects were a little premature, and I'll tell you why. It wasn't long ago that utilities across the country were totally against this. They said, no way you're going to be able to clean up landfill gas and get it to spec to put it back into our system. Same thing on our anaerobic digester side, same thing with the dairy gas side. It took a number of projects to show that we were actually able to clean up the gas to not only their spec, but better than their spec and drier than their spec. And it took a long time to get, and there's some utilities in certain areas of the country that are still not 100% on board. But, you know, slowly but surely, they're all starting to get it that, hey, the technology's here where we can really clean up this gas, you know, either to your spec or better. So now they have a much better comfort level with the technology than they did 10 years ago with the projects you were talking about.
I don't know whether it was their discomfort with the technology. And again, I don't really know this, but I just think they wanted to burn coal and generate power, and they didn't want to think about anything else. And so now, because of smart people like you all, you're just, you know, moving us all forward and forcing these renewable energy examinations. Interestingly, a couple of years ago, Dominion Power came up with their methane collection system in swine production down in Southside Virginia and then North Carolina. And I don't know, I don't know what became of that project, but it was a big, you know, big announcement down in the Smithfield, Virginia kind of area where they were laying collection piping to perhaps bring the gas to a central place for power generation. I just wondered if I wanted to put that out there and ask if anybody
Robin,
really knew.
I think I heard a couple of months ago, I think the project's still going.
Yeah, they're
Oh.
continuing. Dominion is making big investments, but one thing I would say, Robin, is it's funny, like these projects and the technology isn't new, right? Like, so some of these projects, Mike mentioned the Dallas landfill, like they're 20, 30 years old. They've been doing this for a long time. It's just some of the other parts of it have really come together in the last few years. But yeah, I mean, there's some places where, you know, they're doing this and producing either power or, you know, injecting gas, and then now all of a sudden they're like, oh, and we can get all these credits and use it as transportation fuel. So that's a nice piece.
That's the bottom line. That's
Yep.
the bottom line. Another place that I've seen is in Mount Crawford, Virginia, the Coors production plant, Coors beer, and I'm just talking about the little things that I know about it, and I don't get out of the house often. So if that's any indication of the fact that there are lots of methane recovery opportunities. And so I'm so glad that, you know, I'm hearing about these things that you all are doing now to see that, yeah, this may be a technology whose time has really come because of the money to be made.
Hey, Robin, I can give you another piece of information on it too. Not just electric utilities, but if you talk to gas utilities, Washington Gas, virtually their entire strategic plan for the District of Columbia is based upon RNG with a little bit of hydrogen because of the district's, you know, zero carbon goals. Washington Gas is banking their entire continued viability of being able to do natural gas in the District of Columbia on a combination of RNG and hydrogen. Their
Wow.
entire, now, of course, I'm looking at it going, I'm not sure where they're going to get all that RNG from. My guess is a certain amount of that RNG is coming from Virginia.
Okay,
I can tell you, I've reviewed that plan.
Yep.
A lot of it is methanation. There's a certain amount of methanation using renewable electricity. They also have some very optimistic assumptions about collection quantities.
Yeah, very
that they're gonna be able to
optimistic.
get. I don't believe that plan personally, but it is a good example.
I think they're going to have to, if they're going to do all RNG in the district, they're going to have to be importing it from probably Northern Virginia. is my
Yeah,
guess.
it'll
They're
be-
they're
it'll
vague.
be
They're really
annually.
vague about how they're
Annual
going to do it.
increments.
But there's a lot of optimistic assumptions in that plan. Yes.
I would echo the same is true for I was gonna say Georgia Power, but it's Atlanta Gas Light is like the ultimately it was the like the company that owns Virginia Natural Gas. I'm getting the businesses wrong,
It's not-
but
that's not Alta. That's not Alta, is it?
it's but their
No, it's
plan is to
AGL.
also decarbonize the whole
Right.
the whole ecosystem of natural gas over time. And so I think that gets into what Marianne was talking about, and David and Mike. It's going to be these steps. And so the question then is maybe how can we build the industries in Virginia to take advantage of those jobs as well as just keeping this forward. So sorry, but I just wanted to echo the same is true with other natural gas companies in Virginia, is that they're looking over the long term to drop it down to a net zero with this technology. And it might be 2040 or 2035. It's 2045. It's coming soon.
Yeah, DC is I think 2032, which is why Washington Gas is going the path that they're going with their strategic plan, I think.
And so the last thing is, this is a monthly series. So if people are interested, on September 16th at 4 p.m. Eastern, we will be having Electrotherm on to talk about the technologies that convert waste heat into clean energy. So if you're interested, there's a link in the chat to sign up for that as well, or you can keep an eye on our events page. So go ahead, feel free to register now, as Alan says in the chat. But otherwise, thank you so much, Mike and Sahar, for your great presentation. And thank you everyone who joined us today for your great discussion and questions, and just for being here. We really appreciate it.